Good evening. Welcome to a very special event. This is the special memorial lecture in honor of Sir Arthur Lewis, who was a faculty at the LSE. And we are delighted that we have a very eminent speaker. Couldn't be a more appropriate speaker for this lecture, Abhijit Banerjee of MIT. I'm Maitreesh Ghatak. I'm professor of economics at the LSE, and incidentally, a direct student of Abhijit and a longtime collaborator. But also, of course, all of us who do development economics are indirect students of Arthur Lewis. So in particular, today's event is a part of a series of events that the LSE is organizing, marking the rebirth centenary of Arthur Lewis in 2015. It will start with today's is the inaugural event, but then it'll be a final commemorative event renaming the economics department building, the Sir Arthur Lewis building. So there'll be a series of events leading up to that. So I don't want to stand in the way of your eagerness to hear Abhijit's talk, but I should mention a few words about Lewis and his connections to the LSE. And in particular, also just a remark about the connection between his work and that of Abhijit. Of course, one common element is Lewis won the Nobel Prize in development economics, even though the exact citation is pioneering research into economic development research with particular considerations of the problems of developing countries, a bit of a long one. And he shared that with Theodore Schultz. And Abhijit won it in 2019, 40 years later, for pioneering the experimental approach to alleviating global poverty, the prize he shared with Esther Duflo and Michael Kramer. So Lewis was a student here. He came 1933 at the age of 18, and then he was here till 1947, completing his bachelor in commerce, then a PhD in industrial economics, with a very interesting title of his thesis that I was not aware of, which is the economics of social commitments, which is very interesting. Economics of loyalty contracts. So, and it was his work on industrial organization at that time. And then, of course, in 1948, he left for Manchester, where he wrote his classic economic development with unlimited supplies of labor. So I will not, my only connection is both Abhijit, as well as if you look at Arthur Lewis's whole gambit of work, there's a combination of theory, a deep institutional knowledge where social, political considerations are given full weight, right? And the complex dynamics of these factors, and also a serious regard for empirics, which in Abhijit's case, of course, he has gone through several stages, starting more with pure theoretical development, then to a combination, and then to pioneering the experimental method. Last remark, Abhijit has a paper in 1998, which is essentially the Lewis model done in the modern context. So I do suggest you read it at that point. So the dual economy model with the surplus labor integrated with the modern institutional approach. I would now invite Abhijit to deliver the talk, the design of social messaging. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me deliver this lecture. This particular talk, alas, will have little to do with Lewis's work as much as I know it, but Lewis is a very special place in my academic upbringing. I think I got into economics, I've written about this accidentally. I was not planning to be an economist, and I kind of defaulted into it because there was nothing else I could study at that point that was available to me. It worked out okay. And therefore I was a little snooty about the whole thing. And I thought most of economics was a little bit like, I wanted to study math, and it was kind of inferior version of math. It was a misunderstanding of the entire project, but nonetheless, I thought this was a little bit boring math that I could do easily. Turned out that the first thing that I was taught in economics that I thought was really interesting was what's then had become famous as the Lewis model, which was from his paper in Manchester School in, I think, 1951, called Economic Development with Unlimited Supplies of Labor. This paper was, I think, the first paper which I read and said, that's sort of interesting and surprising. And that I think whetted my taste for economics. I do recommend reading it. It is actually remarkably a very kind of, you read it, and I reread it, and it reads very modern. In some ways, it has this very nice mixture of sort of empirical institutional observation and a piece of theory that actually, at that point, people found, I mean, it took people by surprise, which is why it became famous. And I think that's it's something that made me want to be an economist. So it has had a very substantial impact on my life. So with that, let me turn to the subject. So what I want to talk about at this point is something that you probably have encountered, which is how do you do effective social messaging? You know, and this is not, you know, during the pandemic, we started with, for example, in the UK, that was even more confusing for reasons that I won't go into, but even in other places, there weren't enough masks. So the Massachusetts government, for example, recommended that you don't need to wear masks. Then, of course, when masks showed up, they wanted us to wear masks. Then it turned out that there was a political battle over whether people should wear masks or not. And so we went back and forth between wearing masks and no masks. I think what that highlights is the need for effective social messaging, which changes all the time. So it's not just that you have to deliver one message, you have to deliver multiple messages, and you have to make sure that people understand that what you said, you know, 2 months ago was the opposite of what you're saying now, and somehow make sure both stick. So social messaging is effective, has to be effective, and it's challenging. And moreover, you want to think about sort of the way to get it to people, not necessarily just by telling them it, but also because people talk. And so messages can both be transmitted through that process and diluted and mistranslated, all of those. So you have to think about what you want to do, given all the forces that a message unleashes. And then I think what's reassuring, and I'll spend some time at the beginning talking about that, is that during the pandemic, one thing, we couldn't do much. You know, what the work we do in the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, JPAL, is running randomized controlled trials all over the world. Now, when you are sort of locked down, there's not much you can do by way of randomized controlled trial, unless you can do it online or somehow using some technology that allows people to interact without contact. And we realized that that sort of made us look for different things to work on. And one thing we worked on a lot was actually how to get the messaging on COVID right. So and it turns out that when you do that, you actually, surprisingly to us, actually, we weren't entirely optimistic when we went in. We went in a bit out of compulsion because, you know, we felt, A, you have to do something, B, this is one of the few things you can do. So we did it. Turned out it actually did do some good, I think. And I'm going to start by describing some of that work. And then I'll go back to thinking about what that tells us about design of messages. And then I'll come back connected to other work by us and others. So in May 2020, 25 million West Bengal residents were sent a 2.5-minute text message. We're talking about hygienic practices, reporting, and in particular saying that, you know, if you get sick, go see someone. And the person they were supposed to see was this community health worker. It was randomized. There were 3 million people who were in control. So that's and they got the boring stuff. So I'll tell you a little bit about what the what the exciting stuff was, bashfully. And the boring stuff was just a set of links to what the government had to say. The quote unquote exciting stuff was actually a message from me, believe it or not. My co-authors persuaded me that they wanted a celebrity, and it turned out in West Bengal, in that small corner of the world, I was at that point, because of the Nobel Prize, I was a celebrity. So they said, okay, fine, you are our celebrity, you send the message. So I recorded a bunch of messages, 8 of them. Actually, I'll tell you about why 8 of them later, but they were all basically along the same lines, which is that, they had these common messages, which is, these are the symptoms. If you have the symptoms, go see someone, and stay away from other people. And this had very large effects. It doubled the number of reports of health symptoms to the community health workers. That's a sort of a number we didn't expect. And it reduced travel beyond the village. We told people don't travel, because it was you bring diseases back and forth. And that went down by 20%. Or 20 percentage points, so a lot. And then the hand washing, this is self-reported, maybe less reliable by 7%. I don't know whether people actually remember whether they washed their hands or not, but it went up by a bit. We did, inspired by that, we did a set of experiments in the US. First one right after that in May 2020 again with 11,000 subjects, and another one for follow-up in September 2020 with 20,000 subjects. Again, there was a video, not recorded by me, recorded actually by healthcare providers, and about protecting yourself and your loved ones from COVID-19. So what should you and shouldn't you do? Was sent, a set of white and black doctors did it, was sent online to, I told you the sample size. And this shows you what happened to knowledge. And what's on the scale is the number of mistakes they made. So they were asked a set of questions, and 0 mistakes on the extreme left, 6 mistakes is on the more than 6 mistakes on the extreme right. And you can see that basically the orange bars are higher at 0 mistakes and 1 mistakes. Orange bars are the people who got the message. So there was a fairly substantial increase in what they knew. And we said, well, maybe that's sort of not so much. And so this is what happens to the number of people who want, and we offered people different forms of information. You can click on this and you get some information. So we could calculate the click-through rates and who's demanding which link. And you see that, again, the right side of the distribution, which is more links, went up, and the left side of the distribution 0 links went down. So again, people were asking for more information. So people were actually taking somewhat costly actions. And moreover, we actually sold them masks for a premium, it turned out. We offered them to buy masks. At that point, masks were scarce, and they were willing to pay more. So these were willingness to pay for masks, and that went up. So this was real money they were putting online. So these were real effects on people's behaviors. We were kind of impressed that there was better adherence. This is self-reported to protective behaviors. I'll skip this. So then we felt a bit more maybe encouraged, and Facebook approached us to say that, look, we have actually lots of advertising time, which we're willing to give to you. So we organized 2 experiments, one at Christmas, one at Thanksgiving. Both were essentially identical experiments, where the message on Facebook, which is when you're watching, instead of an ad, what would pop up is a message with a video from some set of healthcare providers. And 12 million saw the message, and there were at least 31 million total video posts at Thanksgiving, and there was 81 million at Christmas. So large, I mean, Facebook has reach. You might not love Facebook, but nonetheless, it has reach. And the randomization was at the zip code level in the US, 800 counties, so quite large experiment. And what we're looking for is discouraging people from visiting their elderly relatives. And this was the thing you're supposed to do in the US at Thanksgiving and Christmas. You're supposed to go visit your, your grandmother or something. And the whole thing was, don't do it, you'll bring them COVID. And this was a time when a lot of people were dying from COVID. This is before any vaccines were available. So this is a time when this is really was the one thing you could do, is avoid contact. And the experiment, Thanksgiving, these were the same states. I want to emphasize this because this is the only reason to show these is that these were in not necessarily just in Massachusetts, which is famously open and liberal or whatever. These were all over the country, including in the deep South. This includes some of the more conservative reasons, and I say that with a purpose. You can see that travel went down 2 days before Thanksgiving, and travel went down 2 days before Christmas. Not the day before Christmas, the 2 days before that. You see significant effects on that. And 2 weeks later, this is the graph of COVID. So you can see that the US is the control group, and the red is the treated. And you can see that essentially 2 weeks after you see 2 weeks after Thanksgiving and 2 weeks after Christmas. And here the effects are probably cumulative, because Thanksgiving and Christmas are so close that what probably happened was, since people got less of it in Thanksgiving, that kept continuing till Christmas. So it's hard to separate them. So we present it together because these things are going to be, once you reduce COVID, is going to continue being lower for a while, because of course it spreads through infections. Okay, so think of it as, and so these are significant differences. So there were less cases of COVID in, of the order of about 5–10% less. So not huge, but not tiny. So all of that is to say, I think effective social messaging is important. If you can do it. And now what else? But I want to spend the rest of the time talking about not that it's important to say it's important, but I think to go beyond that, to say what did we learn about design? And there I want to talk about other work that we have done and other people have done. Okay, so this is sort of preamble. Now in the details. So these are the questions. What kind of message? How to deliver it? Who should it be aimed at? Who should be the messenger? Okay. I mean, each of this is a huge question, and I will only say small parts of it, but nonetheless, these are kind of a useful way to summarize it. So the first thing I would say is, I told you I recorded 8 messages. The 8 messages were different in exactly what we were emphasizing. So some were emphasizing, don't do this because it's bad for everyone. And so others were saying, don't do this because it's bad for your elderly relatives. So private versus social. Or the other one was, emphasizing tolerance for the people who had COVID. There was a lot of animus against people who had COVID at that point, because people thought, people were behaving irresponsibly. There was a lot of, strange things happening right in the beginning of COVID. And so there was one of the messages was to emphasize being tolerant about it. And that, again, you might say, could either be good or bad, depending on if the people who were intolerant hit the message, they would say that, you are criticizing me, and therefore they'll stop listening to the rest of the message. So your messaging is always about being, just at the right point where you are giving people some information or some idea that they don't have, but not to the point of pushing them to that they start pushing back against it. So there's always we could detect very small effect. Because remember, we had 25 million people in this experiment. So we could detect almost anything, and there was no effect. It made no difference. So you could say they all had roughly the same effect. So people were, were listening to the relevant piece of information. They were reacting to it. They were not really all the other stuff that we were trying to do to target it to them was not really working. And that's the same thing we learned in the US. So in the US, remember, this is in the May to September 2020. This is when, George Floyd gets killed and the Black Lives Matter movement is extremely active, and general resentment of police brutality is at its height. We were living in Boston, where a car was burnt right 200 meters from our house. A police car was burnt. So it was a lot of passion, I think appropriately, to be honest, about this issue. We tried to, therefore, and especially since this was a period where it was very clear that the death rates among the Black population was 3 times age adjusted than that in the white population. So there was a lot of clear sense that maybe the target population should be the Black population. Okay, so we were very conscious of that, and in particular, we tried to tailor the message by acknowledging the unfairness of this pandemic and by making connections to the Black Lives Matters movement and all of those things. So we were trying to target the message in what we thought were sophisticated ways. Nothing mattered. And not only that, despite, I think, whatever we were, the prejudices about the Republicans and being somehow retrograde, the impacts of the messages proportionally, the Republicans were much more likely to ignore general social messaging. But the relative impact was the same with Republicans and Democrats. So in other words, our attempts to target these messages essentially failed. And there's something important being said. If you look at, these are the graphs for the these are impacts, for example, for the willingness to pay for masks. You can see that essentially the blue bars are the control, orange is the treatment, the people who, and you can see that the big effects are actually on, proportionally, the effects on the white Republicans and white Democrats are bigger than the effects on the Black population. Interestingly, the Black population was always more careful. It's one of the things, they were willing to pay more, they were interested in everything to do with COVID. The knowledge gap for them was also higher, but nonetheless, you can see that there's a sense in which it is, even though our message was mostly tailored for a Black population, they actually had larger effects on the white population. And I think that's a lesson that I want to emphasize, is that there wasn't much, our targeting attempts mostly failed. And I'll come back to that point because I think it's actually saying something important. I'll come back to it. Now, of course, the fact that our messages didn't, the variance on the messages didn't change anything doesn't mean that we shouldn't vary the message. I think more engaging messages are probably better. And there's a nice RCT in a Zurich hospital where they show either give people information, the standard operating procedures, you can read it, or they give them show them a video, and the video does much better in learning precautions to use in a hospital. So it's not the case that the more engaging content, and we did a similar one a while ago where in India, in Bihar, we did an RCT where we made up a sitcom, actually, where we produced a sitcom, which was about why you should take double fortified salt, which is a salt that's fortified both with iodine and with iron, and to get the take up of it. And essentially, and we did all kinds of other ways of giving information, which were less entertaining. And only the entertaining one sticks, essentially. 3 years later, you see only thing that has a durable effect on the demand for double fortified salt is seeing an entertaining video. So I'm not at all saying that, and there's, more generally, there is work, Eliana LaFerrara's work on access to television in Brazil. This is just there's this general claim that you can't affect people's fertility behavior. What they show is that when you look at, a reasonable natural experiment in access to television, you see that watching soap operas reduced fertility by 1 child per woman. That's a number that, it's not the time they were spending watching the soap opera. We did one, and again, HIV is another place where there isn't really social messaging is supposed to not do very much. We did an RCT in Nigeria showing that actually once we did, this was produced with MTV, and we show this video to a bunch of people randomized, and you see big effects on condom use, sexually transmitted illnesses, etc. So you do see people reacting, and I think that that's so I do think that more engaging messages is important. But I don't. But I think I think trying to tailor it by pressing buttons on people may not be that useful. Now, another question is how much information, and I think so. Here's one experiment we did. I'll talk a lot about this experiment as we go, so I'll give you the details. This was during India's demonetization. So demonetization, what happened there was the 2 highest denomination bills were demonetized, and people were given 52 days to get rid of all these bills. Okay? It was done at a drop of a hat, so it was kind of a remarkable. But of course, it was done so quickly that there wasn't a clear understanding of what that implied. So people wanted new money, and there wasn't enough of it. So they kept changing the rules, and so what you could do with your money kept changing over time. So the experiment we did was after the rules stopped changing, but changing rules means people were very confused. So our idea was, let's give them the information. So, and we picked either 2 pieces of information out of 24, or gave all 24 to people. And in terms of behavioral outcomes, we have a bunch of them. I'll tell them there's knowledge, but also real, costly behaviors. I'll tell you about them a bit later. And it made no difference. Okay, you couldn't give more information. People were, and that's not inconsistent with this nice work by Hannah Truckman, who shows that. So this is something that's very real. So we're thinking about COVID, but even during COVID, there was all kinds of other messages coming. There's messages about non-communicable diseases. What about your blood pressure? Shouldn't you get your diabetes checked? Shouldn't you exercise more? So messaging is endless. Even on COVID, in my experiment that I described before, the one where we sent video messages in West Bengal, we asked them, how many COVID messages did you get in the last 2 days? 20 messages. So people are constantly getting messages. Do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. So that's the substrate within which messages operate. So a point I come back to later. So one thing that the experiment this Hannah's experiment did was it randomized whether you got one message, let's say on encouraging meditation, and another one on recommending better nutrition. So there were two messages, and you got either one or both. And you can see that if you get two messages, your ability to remember both of them suffers. So there's information overload. Now, in our experiment, again, people were getting 20 messages. We sent them a message. Interestingly, what we find is, I mean, we're not structured to, know whether there was information overload or not. We didn't vary the number of messages we sent. But what we can see is that when you send the message, you get people reacting in ways that, so the mask was never mentioned in our messages. But when you look at the people who got the message, they're more likely to wear masks. So in other words, part of a message is also, there's information overload, but this is the opposite as well. There's information prime. So I know some things, but I don't want to think about them. And then one more message comes and it reminds you of all the things you have already heard. So there's I think, both going on here. So information is not, so in other words, there is information overload probably for sure, but there's also the fact that people are often saying the same thing in a different way might actually remind you of all the things you know. So there's, in some ways, it's less clear, whether you should keep repeating the same thing or not is not entirely clear. Coming to the next topic. So this was about what do we know about the content. Now, how to deliver it? So this is the experiment I already mentioned, the demonetization experiment. And we had two sources of variation in that experiment. And these were at the village level. They were an experiment in India. We either gave the information to everyone in the village, or we gave it to 5 people in the village. And then in each of these villages, let's say where you got everyone, we again randomized whether we told everyone that everyone is getting the message. Let's say, or told, or the message was blared out with a loudspeaker, so everybody knew, for example, that it was everybody had the message, or we didn't tell them. So so in other words, the first question is, was everybody informed? And that's what I'm going to call broadcast. Or there were some people were informed, which I'm going to call seeding. People were seeds, and they were to spread it. Or we told people, that everyone else is informed. That's what I call common knowledge. Everybody knows that everybody knows. Or we didn't tell anyone. So people were, they were guessing whether they knew or not. Okay, so that's there are 4 combinations of these two. So we can compare them. Now, what the theory comes from a very nice paper by Chandrasekhar Golabanian. Chandrasekhar and Golab were my co-authors in this particular paper as well, who use a lab in the field experiment, so a much more artificial setting, not information about demonetization in 250 villages, but much more small scale, but much more to see whether people, if you give them information that they don't understand, are they reluctant to ask questions? And the reason why and it turns out, yes, they're reluctant to ask questions, and they're reluctant to ask questions because they think that other people will think they're stupid if they ask questions. So now think of that, apply that to the context of, if I tell everyone that this is the information and everyone has it, versus, let's say I tell people this is information, but I don't tell them if everyone has it. Then it's quite natural that you'll think, okay, I know that everybody knows that I'm supposed to know. And they'll think I'm an idiot. And that's what, in fact, what we find we did a lot of focus groups where they say, I didn't ask questions because I thought people would think I'm stupid. So on the other hand, if I know that nobody else except Tim is informed, then it's easy for me, and everybody else knows that. It's very easy for me to go to Tim and say, look, Tim, tell me what I should do, because it's not embarrassing because I don't know. So it's better. So in some sense, informing a few people and making it common knowledge might actually make it better. Whereas if I inform a lot of people, then making it common knowledge might make it worse. So we measured impact along 3 dimensions. Was there more discussion of demonetization? Were people more informed? And most importantly, were they willing to take a still legal 500 rupee note? Okay, so we would give them just a gift, or you can choose that, or you can choose 200 rupees, which was then still always legal currency. So if you could say the 500 rupee note was made illegal, so people might say, look, I don't want that. I'd rather take 200 rupees, we're sure to get it. But in fact, if you understood the rules, then for a while, you're still, while the experiment was happening, you were allowed to keep the 500 rupee note, and it was quite easy to change it. So it's if they understood the rules, they would, 500 is a lot more than 200. It's 1 day's wage more than, or 1.5 days wage more than 200. So it's quite a lot of money that you would give up by not taking it. So this is the volume of conversations, and the bars are getting somehow it's getting cut off. The left bar is seed, no common knowledge. So I tell a few people and don't tell everybody else. Then of course not much happens, because a few people know and nobody else even knows that they know any. Then there is seed common knowledge, which is the next one, which is when you give a few people the information, but you tell everybody else that they know it. The next one is broadcast, no common knowledge. I tell people the information, but I don't make it public. And the last one is broadcast common knowledge. I give people information and tell everybody else that they have the information. And you can see that essentially the volume of conversations goes down a lot. This goes up a lot when you know that other people have information and you're not supposed to have it. And it goes down a lot when you say other people know that you have information, so you don't ask questions. Now, and this has exactly the same pattern for the demand for 500 rupees. So the people who have the lot of conversation, they're also the people who are more informed. They turn out to have more much more willingness to take 500 rupees than the people who are less informed. So it's exactly the pattern you would expect, except that that's saying that you should maybe worry about giving away, you might tell you that seeding might actually be better than telling everyone. And in particular, it's very hard. We did it because we were an experiment, we could do it. But in general, to broadcast something and not tell people that it's been broadcast is hard. So you can't, for example, take a loudspeaker. Then it becomes obvious as common knowledge. So what you have to do is, so in some sense, the most natural way of giving information might actually be to seed the information and tell everyone. That's relatively easy to implement and works better than the others that are easy. But that then poses the question, how do you pick a seed? So this is a question that now brings us in the domain of network theory. Network theory is exactly about these kinds of questions. If I plant a seed at some point, how far does it go? Okay, so that's exactly the kind of question that network theory can answer. The typical framework that's used is, kind of like an infection. I have a neighbor who has a piece of information. If he has a piece of information, then a network neighbor, meaning a friend or a relative or someone I'm connected to, that person then, with some probability, shares this information with me. I might then decide to act on it or not. And whether or not I act on it or not, I might decide to pass it on. It might depend on whether I act on it. If I act on it, maybe I feel like I should be a proselytizer. If not, but So this is the framework that's typically used. This is kind of like an infection model. People are infecting other people. It's sort of like a disease. And again, if you don't get the disease, you pass it on more. Okay. So this is there's a whole set of things you can do to make this more elaborate, but this is the general framework that people use for analyzing these things. Now, one thing you should worry about here is how long are people interested? So if people are going to be talking about for a while, it makes a difference, because then it's not just the people who are very connected who matter, it's people who are connected to connected people, like a Google rank, basically. But if it's going to be very quick, people are going to lose interest in it, then inform the most connected people, because they're the only ones who are going to talk. Then people will say, okay, that's boring, we're moving on. So depending on what people's, how long you think the interest will sustain, you want to either do sort of what is sometimes called eigenvector central. That's like those who are connected to the most connected people. Or you can choose somebody who's degree central, meaning the most connected people, if it's really going to be quick, or somewhere in between, and something we call diffusion centrality. So what we show in a paper some years ago is there was a microfinance organization was entering a set of villages. And when they were entering the villages, they had a fixed strategy, which is to talk to what they call leaders or important people. Important people were the teacher, the person who's runs the store, the priest, a set of fixed people. Now those fixed people in different villages were differentially connected. Some villages, the fixed people were very, very connected to everyone. In others, they were not very connected. In other words, their diffusion centrality, their measure of how connected they are, varied across villages. So we could look at what happens if you go from the lowest connected person to the highest connected person being informed. You're always informing the same people, the teacher, the priest, etc. But some places the teacher is much more connected than others. When you do that, the actual fraction of people who know about microfinance goes from something like 8% to something like 43%. So huge effect on if you inform the right people. That is to say, in the village where the people you're informing are very connected, then you get much bigger effects. So that sort of made us think that maybe we should look at people who are, so that's the relationship. Diffusion central seats are better, so villages which have more. So this now, I'm going to skip this. This is sort of, there's work about exactly this, I'll say it 1 minute. So there's a question of whether or not, suppose you choose better seeds, is that worth how much? How much is it worth? Well, it depends again a bit on how important are the seeds in sustaining a conversation. So if it's one short conversation, I tell you once and it's done, then in fact, it doesn't make a big difference. Now, but often it's not once, I have to keep telling this to many people and then it spreads. And if that's the case, then it makes, then you really want to have people who are more central. You want to choose central. Now, this was what we did. And then we started wondering, what about just people who like to talk? Gossips. You all know such people. People who say, you know what? You know what I heard? Yeah, those people. And can we use them as seeds? One big advantage of that is that it turns out, especially, that we don't have to know who's central in the network. We have to map out the network, and that's expensive. To know who's a seed, to be a gossip, we just have to ask people who's the local gossip. We did this. So when you do this, we asked 15 randomly chosen people in every village to say who will be the best to spread a piece of information about. And it turns out that they all agree. There's always Robin. No, just kidding. they all name the same person. So 4% of the households are named, and everybody's name is named 9 times. So everybody agrees who the gossips are. Okay. So and so then what we did was we randomized whether you give the information to gossips, you give the information to the village elders, or you give it to random people in the village. And the information was about a raffle. And that's the difference. Now, if you quantify it, so the red one is the gossip. Gossip is just way ahead. The gossips are so much better. You can treble the number of people who participate in the raffle by giving it to the gossips. So then what we say, well, the problem with this experiment was that, well, but then do you really think this is important? When maybe this was about a raffle. Who cares about raffles? But when it's something important, won't you want it from somebody who's really reliable? So we did another experiment where we said, okay, are there trusted people? We asked the same kind of question: who's a gossip? Who's a trusted person? Who would you go? And so then we draw gossips with trusted people and random seeds. The outcome was the number of children immunized. So this is something that was much more welfare relevant. You might actually care about it. Gossips are better than random seeds, also better than trusted people and trusted gossips. And partly because they are more central, for the right reason, because they're talking to everyone, so there's everyone's friend. But also for another reason, because we have random seeds, we can see if a randomly chosen gossip does better than everyone else. And therefore, we can see if a gossip is better than their position in the network. And the answer is yes, they are better than their position in the network. They're just garrulous people who want to go out and talk to people, and therefore they do even better than their position in the network would imply. So that's one answer to the question. Then the second answer is, what kinds of seeds? Do they need to like you? So in the US experiment, one thing we did was we varied the identity of the doctors. So there were deliberately, we sent white people, black doctors, and black people, white doctors, and other combinations. And the answer is, it didn't make a difference. People are actually perfectly capable of separating these things, or they seem to be. So that doesn't mean it's going to happen in political space where people don't trust anything, but in healthcare, people are actually, so in a lot of social messaging, people are actually willing to discount. So there wasn't really, the only effect of sending a black doctor versus a white doctor to a white Republican is the white Republicans are more willing to make donations to black charities. So that's the only thing that was significant. Otherwise, it really didn't make a difference. So I think what this is highlighting is that people actually are willing to say, this is a doctor, it says what he does on the screen, doctor at such and such place. And so credibility matters, not surprisingly. Nice experiment to show that by some of our students. It's a very nice experiment where they were shown a projection for CDC, the Center for Disease Control, about how many people are expected to die from COVID. And then in addition, they were shown both what President Trump, who fortunately randomized his statements. So sometimes he would say things about, yes, we should take this disease seriously. Sometimes they say, no, we can just take Lysol or whatever. He had interesting theories. So we could randomize what message of President Trump was sent to these people. And you can see that basically when you send Trump saying nonsense, people stop listening to the Center for Disease Control. So credibility of the government matters. So one of the things that implies is that in many cases, you really want to know who those people are, the seeds are. So there's a very nice paper by Banerjee and Mubarak showing basically that it matters if the people who are trying to influence you, you feel understand your situation. So with doctors, maybe everybody understands that they understand COVID. They see black and white patients. But with most people, you may not believe that they understand your situation, and therefore it might actually make a difference. So it may very well be. So credibility is connected to understanding whether you actually live function in the same context as other people. There's also this other nice experiment showing that when it's a celebrity passing on a message, it makes a very big, on Twitter, this experiment, very nice experiment, showing that basically when the message comes from a celebrity, per se, it really makes no difference. But if the celebrity actually takes the trouble to say it in his own voice, so he's not just resending somebody else's message, then it makes a difference. So in other words, it's exactly the logic of credibility. You're credible when you put a cost into doing it. It's when it's too cheap for you. So in other words, celebrities may want to be careful about what they endorse. If they endorse everything, then it doesn't mean very much. It has to be that they put some effort into it. So credibility has this implication that you want to ration. So I'm almost out of time and almost out of things to say, which is perfect. So I think we've learned a lot in this journey, not our journey, but I think the collective field of how to send individual messages. I think we've learned both to be skeptical of certain kinds of exact manipulation, but also, this idea of using seeds and to use gossips. I think we've learned some important and useful things. I think where we haven't learned is how to combine messages. And that's sort of, if I want to say where all the difficulty is that in a sense, no one message is always sent. You can send a message, but somebody else is already sending another message. So how do you design messages to both counteract other messages, how to place it in the context of many messages? And that's something we haven't at all. There's really no work on this. So I would say that where we are really, I think, and you, for example, if when I send a message as the celebrity, nobody had got a message from me before, so it was novel. But if I keep sending messages every week, they will quickly start deleting them very fast. So, and in fact, they were, so in some sense, you can see already that they were willing to. I think the novelty value of it was that they started the video, they saw my picture, and they almost always stopped there. But it reminded them of things that they already knew, and that's sort of why it was effective. And I think, in particular, another thing we don't know anything about is two-way communications. We really, how do you get people to ask questions? How do you get people to understand things one level deeper and to join in conversations? I think this is where I think all of the work has sort of needs to go. It needs to go towards more the idea that we are actually in the middle of a conversation. People are saying different things. You are trying to be heard within that. You're trying to get people to engage with your message. You want them to speak. If people, I think the psychology experimental evidence is that when people speak back to you, they are much more engaged with the material. So getting them to be engaged is critical. I think every professor knows that. And so I think I think in some ways it's a very exciting place to be, in the sense that I think we've learned a lot in the last 10 years or so. And I think we're also a place where I think it's clear what we need to learn. So I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Abhijit, for that wide-ranging and stimulating discussion. In fact, I'm surprised you said there's no connection between Lewis and the work you presented, because information transmission in social networks and how that would affect, for example, migration, it's something that people have been working on. So I think it underpins a lot of economic decisions, and therefore this work is clearly related to that. I would like to open the floor for questions. So if you just raise your hand, identify yourself, I will go sequentially, and then we'll of course have online questions too. So let me start. Blue Jacket, if you just introduce yourself and ask your question, keep it brief though.
Thank you, Professor. there's one thing I would like to hear more about, and that is, here you are trying to research an honest message, an honest methodology, and intentions are all crossed out. Whereas we live in the fake news era where I wonder when the government of India has been so successful in convincing its citizens that the epidemic was wonderfully handled, we hardly had any deaths, it's all fake news. They are not putting in so much research, and yet they are being so effective. So what are they doing right, and why do people like you have to research so much to reach answers which may or may not be effective? Do they have a magic formula we don't?
I think not. I think that it's precisely, I think people, I've said this in many other contexts, people really like not being told that their life is awful. I think they're playing a lot on that. I think it's an easier message to deliver, that you are really lucky to be where you are. I think it's an easier message to deliver. I think that's why you're going to always have this asymmetry. So I think that unpleasant truths are difficult to deliver. And I think that's not to say that we should stop trying to do it. It just means that that the battle is that much harder.
Mr. Banerjee, and so nice to meet you today and listen to you. What I wanted to ask was how much of a cultural context has a role to play in social messaging? For example, like a country like US may have like a more individualistic society, so messaging around masks might not be effective, but like social community-based country like India might be more effective because people may want to protect their elders or children.
I mean, what we found was people in the US were very willing to, cut their travel to protect their elders. I mean, I am sure it's going to make a difference, the context. What I was trying to say is that I think we saw a bunch of cases where, the experiments were either in India or, I mean, actually I mentioned some in Africa and some in, and what's striking is how much they were, how similar some of the results were. Not that they'd have to be, and I'm sure, as you're exactly right in saying that, certain messages will resonate in a certain particular way. That's the previous question, in a sense, is there's always in the background a set of, what we want to hear, etc. So those will matter. I don't have a, but I think it's interesting to see that people are remarkably able to discount a lot of noise that we're adding to their videos, in a sense. I mean, they thought it was noise.
Okay, yes.
Hi, Professor. I'm a student of media and communication, and I was wondering, you touched rightly upon the social messaging aspect and everything. I was also wondering if you could throw some light on political economy that runs behind that, and also how, while you are disseminating the message, how do you kind of weigh between the imagined audiences that you are targeting and also the kind of real audiences that perhaps might benefit from the message?
What do you mean by that? I didn't understand. What's the imagined audience? Sorry, explain.
Yeah, so for example, while you are researching and while you are kind of targeting a particular audience, of course, there's cultural context and social political aspect that comes into picture. But within that range, there's always this fluctuation that happens in the meaning-making process, which kind of delivers or maybe in some sense also restricts the messaging. How do you weigh out that?
I mean, I guess I haven't, what I was, maybe I still haven't understood is where the trade-off is. I mean, you always have to weigh the, if you speak Swahili in India, people won't understand it. And I mean, you have to weigh the social context. I don't think there's a second way to do it. I mean, everything is going to be, that's a sense in which all translation is also a creation, and there's no mechanical translation of any idea. But I don't think there's a choice there. I don't think we sort of weigh, okay, shall I do literally what I did in Kenya in India? The answer is always going to be no.
Okay, there were a couple of questions. Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor. My name is Alejandro. I am from Mexico and I study health policy. And I wanted to ask you about there's evidence for messaging and insurance, health insurance update. And also I wanted to know if you think that polarization is a challenge and how to address it. And finally, these learnings imply that we have to review economics curricula or perhaps foster more transdisciplinary collaboration.
In the health insurance, I don't have much to say. On polarization, I mean, polarization, surely it's the core concern. I think we were, I would say, overly concerned in a sense, because we were playing the game as if, we expected certain cues to be very important, and those cues will be important, especially in a polarized context. And in a sense, we found less response to those cues than I expected. So I think surely you can tailor your messages. There are always dog whistles of certain kinds, but I think that within the range of things that we were considering, there was not much of a response. I think it was mostly, I was struck by how much, various groups who have very different underlying behaviors. It's not that the levels are the same, but the responses were very similar from many of them.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk, Professor. My question is about the four elements of social communication. So the kind of message and who the target audience is, and so on. My question is there merit in there being a fifth question, which is the message significantly in the public interest to communicate it in the first place? Because I presume asking or communicating messages like vaccines in the deep sound very active doing that can be construed as divisive or political, even though the message itself is very important.
I mean, absolutely. I don't think we were insensitive to that. I think we were worried about it. We were also particularly interested in reassuring the Black population who were dying at an astronomical rate, actually, that this message was sent by people who had an appreciation of their context and problems. So I think it's always a trade-off. You could be planned, and then you can avoid highlighting social divisions. And that comes with the cost that you also don't acknowledge social divisions, which has its downside. So I don't know that there is any magic solution to that. I think we learned that we didn't gain anything from it, and in retrospect, we wouldn't have done it. But I don't think that we knew that, and that's useful to know.
My question revolves around, like, now here we are calculating the average treatment effect. However, humans inherently are different, and there will always be a personality which will act as a moderator. So how are we ensuring that whatever treatment we are giving, it should be catered to each and every individual, and the messages are catered to them? And can technology, and since there's a lot of big data in the space today, how technology can also use that in recommender systems of messages and stuff like that? How do you see that as a
So I think that's a good question. I think it's surely, I think you could imagine, instead of trying to do our amateurish tailoring of the message, you could imagine tailoring the message to, different subgroups. You could use what's called a causal forest to figure out which groups are responding to which message. And it may well be that on average they are the same, but across different groups, different messages work. We definitely could go back and look at that and then use that information. I think we were mostly quite in, we wanted to get the answers out of it, that, to encourage people to do more messaging. But it's a fair point. I think that we could do more.
Okay, lots of questions. We'll take a few more, and then there are online ones. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got one talk. I wanted to ask, even though the studies that you do on social messaging are done for positive purposes, given that your research and its outcomes are widely, are public and available, how can anyone ensure that the principles for effective social messaging that you find are not used for malicious purposes by businesses or, for the spread of misinformation by governments or social media companies?
You can't, and I mean, you could. I don't think that's. I think that once you go down that rabbit hole, there is no exit. I mean, you can think of, if you want to imagine anything you do could have consequences that you don't like, and I feel that that's. I think first we don't understand the world well enough to be manipulative. I mean, I grew up with people who were completely arguing that you shouldn't do anything to help the poor because that's going to bring the revolution closer. And not kidding you. Maitreesh also grew up with the same people. In fact, I've sort of felt like, I don't know when the revolution is going to come and how to make it come about. So I'm going to hold my peace on that one and just, do good when I can.
There's a question there and then at the back. Yeah. So.
Hi, I'm thinking of how we can transpose this idea to the sphere of monetary policy making and specifically forward guidance about setting future expectations. In a field where, with the Fed or the ECB, you have 10, 12 different voices talking about future interest rates and trying to sell the ideas, is there any way wherein we can mitigate the risk of confusion amongst people in a setting so inherent to many messages?
I'm going to let Tim talk about it since he has more experience than me. I would say that famously, monetary policy in the US at least has not aimed for clarity. I think ambiguity has been part of the objective of that policy, maybe for the right reason. There are people who argue that you should keep people guessing, actually. But maybe Tim has something to add to that. He has certainly much more insight into this than I do. Okay, he's refusing.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm Alejandra. First of all, I wanted to say it feels really refreshing to hear someone in person that you've read so much from. So thanks again for being here today. And I guess one of my main takeaways from today is the role of the seeders and how seeding may be more effective than telling everyone. But I'm wondering, to what extent do you think that a message that is communicated by a seeder gets to its entirety to the next person? What I mean is, can you get the message kind of lost in translation? Do you have a risk that that message is not going to be completely well communicated to the end person that should actually receive that message? What's that risk? And then the second question is tied to an earlier one regarding cultural differences, because in the case of the US, it didn't really matter who the seeder was. But what if you go to a cultural context where there's a lot of respect for just a certain person within a village or a community? Or what about a situation in which you're talking about a very sensitive topic, such as, I don't know, I was thinking contraception, for instance, or just like more specifically women-related issues? How do you choose the appropriate seeder there? And yeah, how do you go about that?
So, I mean, I should say that it's not the US that were these experiments that on seeding. There were none of them were done in the US, and so it's in particular we did the experiment on immunization, which is very much a sensitive topic, and are seen as as well in the US, of course, very much. It's only 64% of the US is fully vaccinated against COVID, or so that's it's a sensitive topic, but I think that this was and we found that the gossips did just fine, to be honest. So that's point number one. Point number two is we do have a little bit of data on this question of how good the transmission is. So I remember I was talking about the West Bengal experiment where they were, so the way we did that experiment is worked with, there are two cell phone companies which basically have the market in West Bengal. Okay, one is Jio and the other is Airtel. And we work with Jio, but we also had people in the villages we knew who had Airtel. So we could look at the impact on the Airtel people in treated villages, compare it to the places where they were, compared to Airtel people in other villages. And you get the impact is exactly the same. So the communication was pretty good.
Okay, let's take some online questions and we'll come back to.
Thank you. The first question is from MD Weinberg. Is there evidence that strong relationships impact absorption of information, e.g. ongoing interactions over time with a community healthcare worker having more impact on behaviour than a single message from a doctor outside the community or from a celebrity?
It's an excellent question. I don't think there is any experimental evidence answering that question. It should be, but there isn't.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, another one from Yvonne McPherson. RCTs can measure impact of particular communication output. Conclusions are limited in their generalizability, as the quality of the communication would vary so much, as with the audience preferences. So then, what is the value of these studies? Generalizability is limited.
I think David Hume in 1783 wrote about this problem, that nothing is perfectly generalizable because there's always, the world could always change. The sun, his example was the fact that the sun rose the last few weeks. It was UK, so maybe not. Maybe not. It was in Scotland. But it doesn't imply they will rise tomorrow. So I think generalizability is always a little bit of an act of faith. But I don't see any reason, any other form of knowledge that's not subject to that criticism. So I'm going to not engage in that conversation any further. Mm-hmm.
Okay, another one from Alison Norwood. Thank you for an interesting talk. Can you comment on what works better, positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement in messaging?
It's an interesting, there's a lot of experiments on that. So I think it seems to vary across how bad it is. So if it's a little bit bad, then I think negative reinforcement works better. And if it's really bad, then positive reinforcement works better. If you have cancer, then saying that you can survive is more important than if you don't do this thing, you'll surely die, doesn't work very well. But if it's something that's, I think that's there's actually many people who have done that particular set of experiments. I may be getting it backward, but I don't think so.
Okay, let's take a few more questions from the audience. Okay, yes, please.
Thank you for a wonderful talk, Professor. I'm from the Department of International Development, and I had a question specific to the West Bengal research. So I was wondering if people who you would consider marginalized, say like women or even Dalit communities, for example, were there any noticeable effects on whether or not they were part of the same networks, like whether the gossips or even the seeds, if they had equal access to those networks? Were there any effects you observed?
Yeah, so in the West Bengal study, we had no way of knowing that. These were really the studies are too big to really do that. In other studies, I think that there is a correlation between, in particular with where you live, and that's correlated with social status. So people from excluded communities often are excluded geographically. So you do see those are strongly connected to the network. On the other hand, I saw a paper. So yesterday, which is a very nice paper by Arun Chandrasekhar, Emily Breza, and M.R. Sharan, showing basically that when you randomly make a village, head of the village government to be from the scheduled caste in India, then overall the amount of information that seems to reach the scheduled caste communities in terms of certain opportunities goes down, but overall the spending patterns improve actually. So this, and so it seems to be that yes, there's some value to targeting messages to different people, because they will use information differently.
Okay, at the back, yes.
Hi, thank you so much for a wonderful talk. My question is regarding information overload and the polarization. There is now a tendency, like in multiple countries, for people to just rely on a particular news outlet. So my question is whether the studies in the US showed any correlation between mainstream media consumption and the effect of the messages sent. And if that were the case, how does one go to overcome this barrier?
Yeah, so I think that there are experiments which basically make people, not watch Fox News or something. So there are papers, one of our students, Dong-hee Jo, has a paper on what happens if in Korea, if you are forced to consume instead, or not forced, you're offered free access to a media source that you would not consume. And I think in all cases, the evidence is that you do change your views. So the choice of the media source is sort of self-fulfilling in a sense. You learn what the media source, if you choose a media source and you watch it, you get reinforced in a particular set of beliefs that made you choose it in the first place. So I do think that some diversity kind of, if there's a way to engineer more diversity, that has value.
Okay. Further questions? Let me take a few from that end as well. Yes, please.
Thank you for your time, sir. My question, not just in terms of communication now, but also in terms of research translation efforts at JPEL. To what extent do you think that there's a tendency towards simplification of messages? And do you believe that there's some sort of trade-off with the nuances of academic research involved in that particular communication?
To be honest, no. I think we do a pretty bad job of simplification. I think my instinct is to say that overall, when I speak for myself, when I go back and read my paper, which I thought I had written in plain language, turns out that I hadn't. So I'm going to say that if anything, I think we fall on the side of doing. We don't even know often. The vocabulary we use is so loaded and so potent. So I'm mostly of the view that we do too little on communicating relative to what we should.
Inequities and differences between different groups. In your personal esteemed opinion, why do you think there was no difference in response between different racial groups or political groups in the COVID-19 studies that you ran?
Well, I think that if you think that people are, some people have the information and others don't, and the most naive interpretation, I think it's probably the right one, that, some of them, in fact, if there's no reason why if you give people information, they should not, some fraction of those people have the information and others will, some people don't want to listen to it and some people do. And it's not clear to me that we should presume that the response to information would be different, even if the underlying set of conditions are different. People might very well be have the same motivation for listening or not listening. I don't per se. I don't see there necessarily. There should necessarily be a difference. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Professor, for the talk. I have a question regarding the effectiveness of communication during crisis. So, for example, in the periods of high economic instability or a pandemic like we had, or a natural disaster, would we expect communication to be more effective from the government, for example, or less effective? And as a follow-up question, does it matter the political regime that each country has on the credibility of communications, also in the context of crisis, again, not crisis?
I think the Trump example was a good one there. I think if you have someone undermining himself, then it's going to be harder to communicate. And the point there was that it was the information was not coming from Trump. It was coming from the Center for Disease Control. But just Trump flailing around had made people more skeptical about what the other government institutions were saying. Okay, let's take a few more online questions. We don't have that much time, so.
Okay, there's one from Luis Moray. RCTs have proven to be a very useful thing in development economics. What is their potential to improve other areas of policy evaluation? For example, net zero policy.
I think that RCTs are increasingly being used in every kind of policy. I mean, our biggest growing area is RCTs in the US, actually, not in development. So I think there's no reason why they would not be used, and they are being used.
I have one from Ruby Ruiz. Thanks, Professor, for your work, and thanks for the LSE for sharing your work with the whole world. How important and deep is this? The mask never mentioned in this kind of messages, he said. Okay, that's just random. So one from Ron-John Handik says, do we rely upon social messaging in intergenerational gap?
I think, yes, I think the technology, I mean, Fox News is, look at the profile of who watches them. They're even older than me. if you can believe it's possible. But okay, we have a time for a few questions from the audience. Yes, please.
Thank you. Great presentation. Alex Sutherland, Behavioral Insights team. I'm really curious. You had some amazing results, particularly on the messaging for the healthcare in West Bengal. I'm curious about what happened next. So did the government take up the messaging? Did they roll it out? And if not, why not?
They did roll it out, but again, I say that the problem is we did multiple rounds of messaging afterwards. We did a bunch of them. The problem is precisely preserving the novelty, because otherwise I think people very quickly get inured to it. So I think it's that's the delicate balance, is you can't message too much, because then it becomes nothing. So but yes, we sent out, I think, 2 more sets of messages after that.
Thank you so much for the talk. I've definitely learned so much about effective messaging.
Thank you.
What I'm quite curious about is how do you adapt social messaging or existing social messaging over time with changing developments in crises, especially now with COVID, with different strains and all sorts?
It's an excellent question. It's exactly, I started by saying that essentially you first had to say don't, must and not needed, then you had to say must and needed, and so on. And so there was and made it harder. obviously. So I don't know that, unfortunately, there is no choice, because I mean, part of what makes a crisis is precisely the fact that we don't know the parameters of what we are facing, and we're learning on the go. So, you know, it is what it is. I don't have any magic bullet for that, other than the fact that I think what I've been impressed by is, if you people seem to listen quite carefully, and you know, they get the message. I don't think it's the case that surprisingly, even on something like COVID, where there was enormous amount of noise in the US, you do see people, you know, paying enough attention to the information. I mean, not everybody, and not as much as they should, but maybe, it's still striking to me.
Okay, last one or two questions, yes.
Thank you so much for your talk today. I was wondering, in relation to the gossips and the placing of seeds, how did that change if you were able to look at it in a situation like COVID, where social networks were disrupted, especially when gossips might be effective simply because they're out and about and being social? And when you're being told to stay home, how did you measure the impact of varied communication?
Yeah, so I think it's an excellent question. I don't know the answer to that, other than, I mean, of course, it's not clear that communication went down. People, you know, became even more reliant on social media as a result of that. That's so maybe they were using other means to communicate. I mean, people have I have you know, irreducible urge to talk to people. So.
Okay, one or two, yeah.
Hi, well, thank you very much for the talk. My name is Maria Fernanda. I'm from Peru, and I actually have like one very straightforward question. I wanted to know whether you found any pattern, like profiling pattern of the gossip, like people.
Yeah, so we did look a little bit at that, not very clear. I think it's a lot of what we did find is that there are rarely people who are very busy. So that not surprising.
Okay, one last question, really. There are too many that we can fit in 2.5 minutes, allowing for an answer. So I'm going to randomize. You'll have to trust me on that. Okay. Yes, please. Black. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that talk, Professor. This question is for the methods nerds who are out here. You started your talk by saying that part of the reason why you ventured into some of these questions was because COVID happened and our cities, as they would traditionally perhaps have taken place, were disrupted. So based on the pandemic in the developments of the past 2 years, do you see any sort of fundamental shift in the how or the what or the whys of the field of RCTs moving forward?
Yeah, so that's a classic, you know, low ball. So I'm happy to take that question. It's an easy one. Yes, the answer is very much that I think we learned a lot from how to do, for example, how to use. You know, one thing, just how to use technology in different ways, you know, both more online, but also just when you're interviewing people, how to do it without, you know, sitting next to them, but you want to show them, for example, a picture and have them evaluate it. How do you do that without sitting next to them? And so using tablets, just very mundane things make a difference, right? You can pass a tablet to someone who's 6 feet away, and they can look at the picture on the tablet and react to it. And these kinds of things, and what you do in bright sunlight, it really gets down to the very nitty-gritties of you know, what kind of tablet you can use in bright sunlight, for example. So we've learned a lot, I feel, and now I think we have lots of people have pivoted to using. The other thing that we learned about a lot was how to use kind of data that's collected by governments kind of routinely. So much more, public sources of data. And I think a lot of work has moved towards using, for example, we managed to persuade the Indonesian government to put a question on the national survey. And that's one way to get, a massive sample of answers. So yes, so I think we've learned a lot. I'm optimistic that we're going to come out with. I think we were kind of happy in the groove we were, and now then we're pushed out of the groove, and that's sometimes good for you.
Thank you. That was a really wide-ranging set of questions and wonderful discussion. So it's interesting, one of Abhijit's first published paper was The Economics of Rumors. So in a sort of, somewhat circuitous way, we have come back to, his work has come to the gossip and networks and so on. So thank you everybody for attending this event, those in person as well as those who joined online. I'm sorry we couldn't fit in all the questions, but I think we got a reasonably good sample of the set of things he provoked. So a round of applause to Abhijit for this wonderful event.